I'm sure if we were to tell the truth, MK is the youngest political party, just 1 year old, but it has been able to attract the feelings and the wishes of the South African population. The very fact that we are now a formal opposition, that tells you a very good story about Umkhonto weSizwe.
So what are your future plans going forward, especially
Very simple, to take over the governing of the country. That is our immediate objective that we want to make as soon as possible.
You're a prominent anti-apartheid political figure in South Africa who's been part of the African National Congress, which has recently expelled you from that political party. We know that you've challenged this issue. I just want to get what your views are, because globally, you have been known to be part of the ANC.
Well, there's a long story about that. If you ask that question, you are producing, we are making me to produce a very long kind of an answer. Firstly, as we have said, I joined the ANC at my young age. In fact, it was even before qualifying, I lied to the people who had to make me a member of the African National Congress. I was very young, just 17, when I joined. The reason why I did so, because the ANC is an organization that was established to liberate the people of this country. And it was established by the greater leadership of the black people in South Africa, when there was a clear apartheid kind of behavior that emerged from the British and the Afrikaners after the Anglo-Boer War. It became very clear that whites who had come to South Africa were taking over the country in terms of governing it, doing everything. And the black leaders in South Africa, which included, among others, traditional leaders who were in charge of the country that was taken from them, but secondly, the pastors who were preaching here, as well as our learned people who came together to say we cannot be taken out of the participation of running this country as the whites had decided to do. Those who were in the leading part of this were the British, who had to plead with the Afrikaners to allow themselves to take out the black people from any leadership thing in South Africa. And it was a serious matter that led the blacks to say, let us establish one party that will defend our own kind of interests. And that's how the African National Congress was established. And therefore, everyone was a member. Later on the year, because life is life, I'm sure there were other political parties that emerged in one form or the other. But the first thing was that we should be out of any activity that determines those who must run the country. It was a deliberate thing done by people who were the people who just arrived, found us here living in peace. And that's why the struggle had to start in a different fashion at that time. Now, if that is the case, the ANC therefore was my organization. And I grew within that party. And I fought. And I joined the army when the army came to fight, which was now more the Afrikaners who were now saying after they won for the first time the elections, they said they were going to apply what belongs to them in terms of their beliefs. That a black man is a black man, is not a complete human being. Only whites were real human beings. And that led to us leading to an armed struggle, to fight. In other words, almost to go back to where we were defending our countries from the beginning. It's a long, very difficult and painful story of this country. Now, once that was done, then they indeed increased what was called, popularly known, that the life in South Africa between black and white was strengthened to make the blacks feel the pinch, feel that the people who were white were superior, we were inferior in whatever way. And therefore ended up with a situation where there was a thing called apartheid. In other words, dividing the whites and the blacks, that they cannot be the same. And there are a lot of details how oppression increased from what the British would have made a kind of a thing that you were sort of just saying, you are here, you are with us, but you are under us, that kind of stuff. That led us to become freedom fighters and struggle and become soldiers and everything. It's a long, long what to call. The main thing was that South Africa must be free. We must be equal. We must have everything in the same way as the white and the blacks. And it took a long time, I think the longest struggle in the continent of Africa. We became the first to start. We became the last to be, so to speak, free. The idea was to have South African free, fully, equal to everybody. There's a way these things were done. For an example, when there was a decision that we should be free, should be equal, a lot of difficult things were said. For an example, to say that let there be negotiations, which was never done when our country was taken. There was no negotiations. It was taken by force. But given the passage of time, we had to deal with that. When we went for negotiations, and perhaps unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, I was made to be one of the people who were part of starting that as a result of the decisions taken, and therefore agreed that we are going to negotiate. In other words, we are going to find a way where we could live together. But as we're negotiating, the time had been too much. The wars had been too bitter. And therefore we had to sit and talk. How are we going to negotiate? And I think we agreed that we'll negotiate. And after negotiating, we will make the country come together, because we've been fighting, killing one another, arresting one another. Many people had died in jail, in the battles or whatever. A decision was taken, supported by the world, that we need to bring peace and put South Africa back to where it is supposed to be. As a result of that, we decided the first term would be very difficult to deal with, because the anger and the problem among us was too deep. So we'd make the first term to be run in terms of government in the country by all of us, black and white. Parties that will win a particular number will then be the ones who would be part of a government that would be put together. We called it government of national unity. In other words, we're trying to unite these people who have been fighting for years. In other words, even the manner in which the agreements will be soft to allow us to come together, to allow to accept that we can live together. After that first occasion, we'll then allow the party thereafter, after the first term, in the second term,
The ANC.
the party, whichever at the time, we did not know because we hadn't won. Whoever will win will be the one who will then determine how this country is run. And the party that emerged was the ANC. ANC, in other words, had its own policies, every other thing, that once we are in power, we will rule this country the way we want, which will be good for everybody else. Then, once we came there, the movement to change was very slow. But nevertheless, everything, times we needed to give it time, etc. I personally felt we were not rushing to change. There are things that are written in serious documents that we, when we are in charge of the country, this is what we will do. Very little of that was happened. I mean, just to put it mildly. We ended up with an emphasis on what we call the equal rights to everybody. That was done. But it was not actually done to do it. Some of the things that were supposed to be done, they were never done.
In the Freedom Charter?
The Freedom Charter, for an example, is a key document. If you look at it seriously, it was equal rights that were attended to in the Freedom Charter. What the Freedom Charter says was never attended to. And you would have felt, therefore, that with time we are going to address the issue. But the issue was never addressed up to this day. It's now 30 years. It has never been addressed. Instead, we were going backwards rather than going forward as this organization. Now, as the time went, it was worrying. We finally ended up with a situation where the leadership that came was no longer even thinking about anything. If anything, it was reversing many, many things. That's a current
ANC.
I always forget this name at times.
I feel like I'm getting a political lecture from you at this point, His Excellency. I do want you to touch on that issue then, on that ANC that you mentioned that has made this journey to this point, which has expelled you, which you were part of. You joined at an early age of 17 years old, which has now expelled you. I know you've challenged this issue, but what are your views about them actually expelling you?
I'm starting like this because I want you to have a clear thing, because people at times misinterpret things. Even in that one, I'm going to come, because you started with at the beginning, that I'm being challenged and I'm challenging people. It was part of this history that I'm talking about, wherein we're all together. We had all agreed what we need to do. When we reach a point where my colleagues were no longer moving, when I was at some point given an opportunity to be the president of this country, because I was beginning to implement what I fought for, what I took decision to die for. Once I started, I was criticized.
Some even put allegations of corruption under your
Exactly.
tenure.
Exactly. And not a single one has ever produced even a stick of match that I stole anywhere.
Even with the revelations that came out from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry?
There's nothing, even the man who was reading it has said today it was wrong. That tells you that everything that was done was cooked against me, probably, and other people. Because up to now, with regard to Zuma, nobody has said, this is what Zuma did, which was wrong. Nothing. I have even gone to prison when I've never even appeared before a magistrate, let alone the judge. I served. It was all cooked. So I don't want to get into that one. I'm just telling you why I'm moving.
Who cooked it?
Those who are in power.
You are a political figure that has sources all around the country. You would have insight and some intelligence as to who cooked it.
I'm saying it was cooked by those who are in charge. I don't want to be counting names of people, how many. That's not the issue for me. They know themselves. And those who are helping them, writing news and everybody, they also know.
Let me get this right before we move on to the next point, His Excellency. Are you saying the ANC that you joined before, during the apartheid era and coming into the democratic dispensation, is different from the ANC that you see today?
I was going to come to that, but since you want it now, yes, ANC that I joined is not the ANC that I left. It was a different kind of an ANC. I can say painful things about it. I don't think that is the way to deal with the matter. But to answer your question briefly, yes, the ANC that I joined, that I was prepared to die, that I went in prison for 10 years for, I went into exile for 14 and a half years. It's not the ANC that I left a few years ago. It is a fact. I was trying to make the picture become very clear. That when I joined the ANC, I was clear that I'm prepared to die to liberate my country. And once my country is liberated, how this country will be, how it will be governed, is as clear as anything. I don't want to tell you many other things. Being the former president, I was in a conference where I pulled my hand to make a contribution. And deliberately, I was avoided until I could not put across what I thought. That was not the ANC. In the ANC, every member had the right to speak his mind or her mind. That's no longer the ANC I can talk about. So I don't want to dwell in those because it will make me discuss too many other things that are not that important.
Okay.
Because what I'm trying to say is that the reason why I took a decision is because the ANC was no longer the ANC I knew.
So what is the difference?
I could no longer put an opinion, even if when I put my opinion, it was put aside. And therefore, that is not the ANC. That was not the believing of the ANC that you can be deprived of your views as it is. I wouldn't want to get into that because the point I thought it was important was to say we reached a point where you could no longer do what you were doing when we were ready to die because you were no longer allowed to speak. The kind of leadership that emerged were wrong leadership. Perhaps if you'll be still around when I write my book, you must read it. I might be saying more things in details. What happened to the African National Congress of Tambo Mandela.
So what is the difference between the ANC then and the MK party?
No, before getting there, I want you to head it nicely because you just know that and not know any other thing. I made all the efforts. I did not just walk away from the ANC because I still wanted to correct it because it was an organization I trusted. But the people who were leading were no longer interested in that. They were doing another type of running of the country outside the serious policies of the ANC. And I could not stomach it.
Is that the current leadership of the ANC that you speak of, that you're referencing?
Absolutely. I'm speaking of them. Speaking of them, it's just 2 years I've left them. If not two, I'm getting to the second year, first year. That is what I'm talking about. They moved off the policies, the things that the ANC was established to do. And they were no longer listening if we wanted to say, can you put this thing right? I then took a decision to continue fighting for a complete free South Africa, because the ANC was no longer the ANC. We now call it GOGO. You know what it means.
Grandmother.
Grandmother, exactly. Because, in other words, implementing the policies of the ANC was no longer the issue. The issue was to reverse it, including the poorness in the leadership itself. What they were saying, what they were talking about was no longer what we know.
It's interesting that you mention the policies of the ANC, which is now in a government of national unity with the Democratic Alliance that has different policies from the ANC. What do you make of this government of national unity? Is it reminiscent of that negotiation period which you alluded to, which you mentioned as a soft agreement, so to speak?
I wish I was just talking, not you asking many questions, because I'm coming to all of those questions. But there are good things we may not understand. Because if we talk about government of national unity of today, we are talking about many things that happened even before the ANC chose to take the enemy to be the comrade. Because if we jump, and I don't think we are going to get what I would want to, why I took a decision. The decision I took is not a small decision, it's a serious decision. I wouldn't have taken it. I respected the ANC. The very fact that I've said I remain a member of the ANC is a story of its own. Why would I do so? I thought I would go through a little bit of that so that when we come to this, we understand exactly what has happened. Firstly, a very funny president came in, very funny man, who came from the working class, as they call it, right? Whom today is always a mystery. How did he emerge up to becoming the president when there are people who had been there all the time? Are issues one day we might want to talk about. And I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about what made me to take a decision to leave the ANC. Not to leave it as a member, not to vote for it. Not to vote for it. And I made it very clear, even to them, that I'm remaining the ANC, but I'm not going to vote for the ANC. I'm going to vote for the new party, Umkhonto weSizwe Party, because they have deviated from the policies of the ANC in many respects, which, as I said, when I have time to write, I'll write to explain this for the sake of our history, because they moved away. But what is critical is that when it was difficult to do anything, I had no alternative but to continue to finish the liberation of our people. And that's what I decided to do. And I gave it a very serious thought, which at times our friends would not understand, not only outside of the African space, or whatever, that in fact, it was very difficult. But people who might not have been with us, they wouldn't understand why will a man like Zuma, who was ready to die, who went to prison and did everything.
For the
How
ANC.
could, for the ANC. But the ANC is an organization for the people of South Africa. If the ANC begins not to take attention seriously of the people of South Africa, then why are you there when you're not a leader? Because if I was still a leader, I would have said, okay, I'm now going this way. But I knew when I was a president, I was made to leave that office before I could finish, because those people who were doing that to me were clear that my being the president, I was quickening the process of changing or also implementing policies. And my comrades decided to conspire that I should leave before I finish, because I was messing up whatever that was in their minds. So it's not like something that happened now. And that's why if I talk about this, it's not a matter of just going over in not explaining what happened so that somebody will understand. Part of the reason, for an example, I said I would remain in ANC and I will fight, I will go to court as we are going to court. Because it was not the ANC I joined, it was not the people who died that I could have said, oh hell, with you guys, me, I'm gone. I had to remember them. I had to make what we took as decisions before to succeed. And therefore, the ANC, because if I say the ANC is now baba, and I will be, in fact, saying to the ancestors and everybody else, you were wrong. And I did not want to say that. I wanted to say, it is the leadership now that is wrong, not the first ones. I thought I could not take that, a very rich history, and just forget about it. I want to remain in the ANC, but the real ANC, not the false ANC. That is the reason why I said I'll remain, and I'm still going to go to court to defend my membership card. I was not forced to join the ANC. I joined it voluntarily. And I'm proud of the ANC of the old, not the Gogos. The Gogos, And I'm defending the ANC from the Gogos. And that's what I'm doing. I just wanted to put it in brief so that you understand it. It is therefore, it was not just a question of, I think I don't like the ANC. No, I love it. It's the best organization that I've joined in my life. I spend a lot of time, but I cannot allow it to be abused by people who are deviating from the policies. That's the reason why when I decided to have an organization, because I couldn't just go and sit down, I thought I should think very carefully. Even the name of the organization, Mkhonto Wesizwe, it has its own history, which will appear in my book the day you read it. Why it was important for the name, and why it resonates so well with the South African people. Because it tells the truth we know about the ANC and about those who died for the ANC. So, in a sense, people don't seem to understand how. I've been asked by my former colleagues in the continent who don't understand, because I did not shout this or say, now I'm doing this without knowing what I'm doing. How could you leave the ANC? And I've said, no, I left the rotten ANC. Very, 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 very funny. But the ANC I joined, that made us to liberate South Africa, I'm part of it. And therefore, I have a responsibility to correct the ANC, take it back where it is supposed to be, away from people who are not interested about where we need to arrive. That is the thing. I just thought I should explain these little ones at this point so that you don't worry to say why this happened. I tried my best. I can tell you more other details where I even sent a memorandum which was given by a branch in this province, asked me to do so because they were not listening. And I sent it, they acknowledged it, but just ignored it. So the reason why I established this party, and this party cannot go wrong, Mkhonto weSizwe, it's a well thought out party for a number of reasons that demonstrate how we, who were part of the ANC, understand the politics of this country and the ruling, the manner in which this country is ruled. It is absolutely critical. The ANC is no longer talking about what we used to talk about in the real ANC, about the people of South Africa. There is more starvation, more problems that you have, more poor people. There is no attempt to change the people, particularly the black people, so that they are part of a country that is rich, that is supposed to have everything, but they are deprived of that.
So let me ask you this then, before we move into global issues, His Excellency, what do you make then of the ANC working with parties like the Democratic Alliance, the IFP, and all these other smaller political parties in the GNU?
You know, if you just look at the GNU, it tells you the whole history, that we are dealing with the ANC leadership that could no longer differentiate between the oppressor and the oppressed, because it is a fact. Precisely because of Mkhonto weSizwe, which had more votes than anybody else, and that is still in court to deal with it. You had a situation where members, revolutionaries, believers on the liberation of a black person, and we could look into what is happening here in this country. The economy, you can count them by fingers, few fingers, black people who are big business people. It is all white. In 30 years, you can count them a few. We still suffer in many ways. And we go from elections to elections. There's almost a pretense that everything is well. Even when we say we are going for elections, we are no longer talking about the actual things that affects black people. And when there is almost like numbers are almost like together, and you want to change who will help one party to increase her numbers, and those revolutionaries go to reactionaries to say, let us be together and have the government of national unity. What are you uniting? What are you governing?
With the DA.
With the DA. DA has been the opposition all the time. The ANC move to join them, leave everybody else who's suffering. That tells you how much they are no longer caring of the poor white, poor black, who still need to be freed. It tells you the story. What is worse, the DA actually says it in public. This is not like a government of national unity. It's a government of between the two, ANC and them. Simple. That was just done to wipe off people from thinking this is serious. That actually worsens the situation. There are many people who are leaving that organization because of DA. Because DA is part of what oppressed us for many years. Just switched a little bit when we're here in a nice name, Democratic Party, I don't know what it is.
Alliance.
Alliance, whatever. That in itself must be telling somebody who can think that this is a fast. It's not the real thing. It's not there. People who are there are finding a way out, the way out. Because DA is DA, he's doing his own. Mlungper, it's a white fellow. In fact, it is, in my view, a disappointing thing. Because you take those people, they know nothing about how you work for democracy or whatever. And they represent us all over the world. We who disagree with them a great deal, we now disagree with ANC. Totally disagree. Decision that they took, it's not a decision which represents us as the majority. It represents them, a black minority working with the whites. It's not us. That is why it is our wish that our friends out there who knew the ANC and knew us, who are now in the Umkhonto weSizwe, must be looking very carefully and be sure that they get the information. For the fact that people say we are free, I don't know how much we are free in South Africa. I can tell you the long story about this country, that there's nothing that has changed. If yes, very little. The people who were being put in the rural areas, starving, our freedom just allowed them to come to town. To be even worse, they live in things that you can't want to live there. It was even better because the quantity of that was not there before freedom. Yes, there were small little dokies where people were sitting, blah, 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 but they were smaller. After freedom, there is more in town. The visible of starving is more than when we're free, in terms of the numbers in the cities, etc. So people can decide to mislead people or whatever, but the reality is that we are in trouble. And we, some of us, cannot wait for that. We want freedom that is full freedom to black and white, to everybody in South Africa.
We eagerly wait for that book, Mr. Zuma. So let's move to
Who is
global
coming?
politics.
Just fearing them.
All right. So some statistics reveal that in the past 15 years, the related terror attacks in the Sahel region have spiked. I'm saying this because I'm leading to a point, or a recent statement, I should say, that was made by the president of France, Mr. Macron, claiming and saying that some African countries are ungrateful for the assistance that France allegedly gave for combating the jihadists. What do you make of that statement, particularly as someone who was very prominent in the liberation movement as an anti-apartheid political figure?
I think ever since France came to colonize Africa, it has never made it better. If I talk about France, where this statement comes from. When France was decolonizing, they decided to leave the army, a powerful army, in any place that they were. in order to suppress them if they did anything. That was not thing for us to say thank you, because they did not do what they were supposed to do. They decided that the resources, money, will be determined in France on behalf of the Africans who were freed here. I don't know what France thinks about it. We should have said thank you very much to take our money and use it there and have the soldiers. This is what has led to the recent coups. So it's a wrong statement. I don't agree with it because it has not helped us. The thing that says we are helping you or whatever, not helping us, does not agree that we are free, we do what we want. People who have just conducted coup d'etats recently, because they say we can't have our money in France. We can't have the soldiers from France here when we have got our own. That in itself tells you the man is just talking. He does not know how black people have suffered from white people, particularly the French. So I don't even want to debate that one because it would take me to debate things that are too far. I'm busy dealing with the situation here, with the British in particular.
But I just want to stay a little bit with regards to France. Chad, I'm sure you agree with the statement that they've said, claiming that Macron is insulting the intelligence of African countries by insinuating that they are ungrateful. I'm sure you agree with that statement.
Of course, yes. I'm agreeing. I did not want to get into the details. I just wanted to say that fellow is wrong. We have suffered since they colonized us up to this day. That's what I was saying. In other words, I was answering the question that it is part of what whites think about us.
I'm sure you also agree with Senegal and Ivory Coast's decision to withdraw the troops, French troops in their regions. I'm
Absolutely,
sure you do.
I agree totally. In fact, it is too late. They should have done a long time ago because it is wrong. Why are the forces of a French country are stationed in Africa, in the country of somebody else? Why? It's because they think they're our fathers. And I think that time has come. We cannot longer wait for that.
So you're saying Africa should be seen as a powerful continent that can call the shots for themselves?
It is a powerful continent, only disturbed by the colonizers who are still colonizing us in a modern way they think we cannot see.
Recently, the U.S. Secretary of State was lambasted for the U.S.'s stance when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war, or genocide, if you may. What do you think of South Africa coming forward and defending the people of Palestine and how it has gone about to deal with that by even going as far as filing a genocide case?
No, I think there is an old problem we have, that those who were oppressed many years ago are still oppressed. Those who feel they are very powerful, they are still using their power. For an example, the whole world looked at a country in the Middle East where buildings were bombed, small kids were killed. And the world, the civilized world, absolutely said nothing. Nothing. Even now, they are forcing other people to say they must accept the manner in which they present their story, how they must all come together. This is a problem that has faced the black people and also the people in the Middle East. That issue has never been resolved. Whether you have the United Nations, it has failed to deal with these matters. It's a fact. And therefore, I don't want to say, well, a nice man has spoken there, because they all talk around their own area of satisfaction. They're not worried about anybody else. And if you argue, they force you, they kill you. We are not yet right in this globe. Not yet right in this globe. Because some people, for an example, we stay in Africa. Africa has lost a lot of its resources taken by people from Europe. And they still take them today. It's as if God said, you live in your area, but you go to Africa to take what you want. There are companies, huge companies from outside of Africa who own the resources under the earth. It doesn't belong to them.
Resources that are in Africa.
Exactly. And they never bought it. But they are taking it every day.
With Mr. Donald Trump, President-elect, the President of America, do you think his presidency will see about a shift in policies related to these ongoing wars, which includes the Hamas and Israel conflict?
I think the President of the United States of America has said something with regard to the war in Russia, right? Very clear. I haven't heard him about the country we are referring to, whether there has been a clear thing that there must be the end of battles all over. However, he is one among the few who have said something that makes sense. I think he said, we cannot use our money to fight a war in Russia when we've got it to be building our country. There are not many who have said so, but he have said it. We take note of that because it is important. But as to the battles in the Middle East and the United States, I don't think I've heard very distinctly that there is somebody there who says this thing must come to an end. I haven't. Maybe I missed it.
In November last year, Ukraine launched long-range US missiles into some regions in Russia. You speak of the conflict there in Russia between Russia and Ukraine. Do you see the defense then by Russia on Ukraine as justified?
Why other countries shouldn't be assisted by others who feel that this is unfair? I think it happens generally in places because whether we ask the question as you do, but there is a reality that the interests of the Western countries and the interests of the Eastern countries has never come together. Has never come together. Partly it has affected Middle East a great deal, and they are even slightly better because they can fight. Africa is worse. That's why they take everything they want from Africa. Why can't we have peace that people who live in their own, they must be allowed to live wherever they are? If they've got resources, they must sell their resources to enrich their countries. Why should be some little small countries being more powerful and everything against other people in other countries? Why is the situation of peace that we talk about and ending war that we talk about, why can't it exist? Why can't we not succeed to stop the wars and everything? Who are problematic? I think Western countries are. We are still arguing what we are arguing about here because of the Western countries. Why can't they go and sit where they are? If they want to buy something here, we sell it to them. Why should they take our stuff, have it, sell it to us, do everything. Why? Was this law made by God? No. Man-made. Why? Why can't we be allowed to live where we are in the manner in which we want? If you want to have relations with them, have relations. Why should these relations be imposed to other people?
Speaking about Mr. Donald Trump, he has recently made threats against BRICS members, or BRICS heads, I should say, and particularly South Africa, threatening them to impose tariff hikes if they continue their relations with countries like Russia and China. When you hear such threats from the West on Africa and how it conducts its business and how, like you say, deals with its resources with other countries, what do you think when you hear those threats?
That is part of the problem we have. Part of the problem we have. Why should a country threaten countries in Africa as if it's talking to the small boys? You can't do this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Don't you see something wrong there? Why? Because a country should do what it wants to do. Whoever says so, that is a problem I have been talking about all the time. Because you have a country with its own resources and everything, which says these countries are my little ones. You can do this with somebody else, we are going to be in trouble. Why? There is totally something wrong in the manner in which big countries treat the countries that are small, the countries that are said to be probably not as big as whatever. Why should that happen? Why should a person threaten you when you take your own decision to have relations with some people? Then you must be taken into some problems. Why should that be the case? I don't think we need that. This is what we are saying as Africans. We don't need, you know, when South Africa joined BRICS, we haven't talked about those matters. It was very important because, among other things, was to deal with this very issue, that there are countries that must be like in prison. And because the West is, in a sense, dealing with these countries, and therefore there are countries that we cannot deal with. Now, it's not correct. It's not correct. BRICS brought something different to try to bring equality. Part of the reason, and I can tell you one day, not today, that there was a deliberate, why you ended up with a war in Russia, is because the Western countries were trying to put down BRICS. If you know what they did in Latin America, in Lula. He even went to prison when he had no case, a case that was established. This man he's out now because they decided to say, this little one, let us deal with. In order to also disrupt this, they changed the party in India and forced that another party must come in so that you reduce the party that was joining BRICS, that was part of BRICS. I am an experience of that. Part of the reason I was removed before finishing my term was also to deal with BRICS. They put their newspapers or media to say China was going down, the economy, blah, 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 lies, and felt that Russia must be attacked. All of that is part of BRICS' coming into being. We haven't talked about those matters a lot because That has not been the issue to talk about. But I'm just saying, you deal with Western countries who are always causing trouble, who are always making other people get into trouble when it is not supposed to be. Now, what has happened to them? Because they attacked Russia, Russia said, sorry, we've got our oil here, and whoever wants our oil is going to use the Russian money. Do you know that changed the world somehow? Because many other countries thereafter began to say, we are going to BRICS. BRICS now has more, whether full members or not yet. Only if you have a grouping like BRICS can you bring this earth into sanity.
I'm glad you spoke about BRICS because I wanted to get your views there on some of these African countries also wanting to be part of the BRICS umbrella and the notion and the probability of a BRICS currency, which some even point to a de-dollarization, which has threatened America. What do you think of that?
I think that's absolutely wonderful. BRICS is moving, and we need BRICS. We need BRICS because BRICS is not colonizing. BRICS is doing business, relationship with everybody else. And I'm happy that many countries, that some countries in Africa, Middle East, have seen what needs to be done. That is going to make this world be a world with a kind of relationship that will make people not starve in other countries, whilst in other countries they don't know what to do with the money.